So the Western world is really I can't say it. Individualistic. Like Americans are very oh my god. Yeah, they're very individualistic people. Hello, my name is Sheila. I'm 21 years old. I'm from America, Houston, Texas, and right now I'm a student at Yonsei University. I actually worked at a pharmacy called CVS. I was a manager there. I was a sales representative manager, and then I came to Korea shortly after that. So I actually have a long history with Korea. I think I've always wanted to come here since middle school, but I never really had any reason to, so I told myself to study in Korea just for the fun of it. And then I became really interested in Korean history and international relations and just really how Korea operates as a country. So that was my first interest, and I worked really hard to apply for the universities here and study here, and eventually I gained more knowledge about the country itself and the people around me, so I made it a long-term goal to try to live here long-term instead of going back home. Getting a job in Korea is really hard because a lot of Korean workers or Korean bosses do prefer foreigners who do speak the Korean language at a very advanced level, and many foreigners don't really obtain that skill. Like for example, the TOPIK test determines how well you can speak Korean, and so if you don't have this sort of certification, it's not attractive. It doesn't make your application attractive. And I think that's the first barrier. And the second barrier, I think, would be the culture is really different because there's so many foreigners from different countries with different cultures and working styles. So Korean people prefer people who can adjust to their working style. So they don't really want to learn about other people's culture. They just want to have their own ways of doing things, which I think creates many barriers about getting a job in Korea. When I got a job in Korea, I think first I told my mom, and she actually scolded me. She told me, no, you should study, don't work. And I told her I kind of have to, especially if I want to integrate myself in the Korean society. And other people around me, especially at school, kind of looked down upon it because I feel like for Yonsei University students, all they do is study, just study, study, study. So working and studying was kind of looked down upon, but I wasn't working much at the time, and it just started from there. But over time, people started becoming okay with the idea, and they actually came to me for help, like, oh, how did you start working in Korea? That's so interesting. So I think now people have a good reaction, but if you're not a student, people are automatically worried. I have different friends when they tell other people that they work in South Korea, the first thing they ask is, are you okay? And the person's like, yeah, I'm totally fine, because there's so much cultural differences when it comes to working. So that might be a worry a lot of people had and still have. I think the hardest point might actually be the beginning stages of actually trying to get a job in Korea, because you need to make a resume or a CV, and then you need to go ahead to get those CVs out, and sometimes it might get rejected. My first job actually in Korea was working for my school. I was an assistant at our global help desk in Yonsei University. So when other students had questions, they would come to ask me. That was my first job. It was really easy because I already attend the school, so the school didn't have to do much in application process. But if you work outside of your school, it can get really hard because you need to have a Korean formatted CV or resume, and it needs to be in Korean. I think that's the hardest part for many Koreans who don't know Korean, because Korean speaking and Korean writing is really difficult and very different. There's different levels of formalities, and I think for foreigners, they don't know it well enough to write their own resume. So I think that might be the hardest part, actually, getting a right formatted resume or CV. I think every country has a different format for their CVs. but Koreans demand it's the same format for everyone, and I think the written part is really important. Like, why you want to apply for the job. I think sometimes they ask what's your weakest point and what's your strongest point, and it's very different because American resumes don't really ask for that. They just ask for your background, about what you did before and experience. So I feel like with the written parts of your CV in Korean, it can be really hard because you have to really put yourself out there and market yourself as relevant as you can for the specific job you apply for. To find a job in Korea, there's different agencies or apps or website you can look at, but I think a lot of the times people find jobs through word of mouth or their community, but these days there are many applications like K-Tag or K-Campus, or I think it's called Buddies Korea. There are so many new apps coming out, and I feel like if you are a student too in Korea, your school should have an announcement page where they post career opportunities, job opportunities, internship opportunities, things like that. There are more apps like this and websites coming out. So that's how I found a lot of the jobs that I did. It was first through my school and then through these apps like K-Campus. I think it's gaining more popularity now, and K-Tag and Buddies Korea. I think it's called Buddies Korea, but a lot of foreigners I know have found their job through there. I didn't really use the agency's help because so many people apply, right? Sometimes it can take them a while to get back to you. So I didn't really use the agencies much. I just did everything myself. I had my Korean friend help me, which was really helpful. If you also have a Korean friend, they can help you with the process of resume building or just finding different opportunities that they've heard about. But I haven't done that yet, so I wouldn't know. I have a D2 visa. I study right now, and the process was really, for me it was really gruesome because I did the application all myself. For a D2 visa, you must show the Korean government that you have a specific amount of money saved up. I think the time I applied it was 20 million won, but I think it keeps changing. Sometimes it's 15 million won, and I didn't know this, so I had to take a break from school, from going to school, so that I can save up that amount of money. Then you need your high school diploma. You need to get those documents apostilled. But I think for many foreigners, if to get a D2 visa, the process, Korea already speaks Korean, and there's so many foreigners coming to visit, so they only operate in English or Korean. So I speak French, so some of my documents, like my birth certificate, is in French, and the Korean government wouldn't take it. They told me I had to get it translated, and then I had to get it translated, and then I had to get it apostilled, which means you need government approval that the document is true and it's not fake. So I think that was the hardest process for me because I lived very far away from my closest governmental office. So many people don't know these type of information. It varies from country to country. So just check with your government to see what you need and how you can do it. For me, it's a student visa, but for other people coming with working visa, it's different. So for foreigners coming to Korea with a working visa, the application does look a bit differently. You need approval from your job offer, and the agency you applied for needs to sponsor your visa. And most of the time what happens to many foreigners is the company doesn't know the process well, and they don't want to do it for many foreigners, so the foreigners themselves have to figure out the process to do it. I think it varies from company to company, but you need to have a legal formatted contract with you and the company, and then you can start your application process there. It might look different from country to country, but I'm not too sure about that coming to Korea with a working visa. There's different types of working visa, but it can look different depending on what you do. For example, you could be a model, or you can do something entertainment related, or you can do something maybe business side related. It can vary, very different. So actually, I forced my friends to help me with this process. For my resume, I format it different based on the application. So if I'm applying for 3 different jobs, I will make 3 different resumes and CVs to target what the job is looking for, of course. And then for the interview process, I have my Korean friend ask me a couple questions in Korean that they might ask me, and I just practice with her as much as I can, because for foreigners, they also have, for most jobs in Korea, they have a translator too, or somebody that can speak English. But there's always, depending on the type of job you have, sometimes you can do group interviews, or it's just one-on-one interviews. And for group interviews, it will most likely be in Korean. So that's how I prepare. Depending on the job requirements, I look through it and just prepare that way from what they need from me and what they're looking for in the position. But I just get my friends to help me practice the interview, so I'm a little bit more confident. The process for getting a job in Korea, for me at least, it was fairly easy at first because at my school, they were looking for a foreigner to help their international students. So if international students have any questions, anything regarding Korea, they would come to me. It's called the Global Desk Center. Usually it's for exchange students, international students, or anybody visiting the school that's not a student, so parents, old people, young people, anybody. So I got my first job through there because I already knew people who worked for them before. They recommended me, and so I started working like that. But then afterwards, looking for a job myself, it was really, really hard, and I just got recommended again from my friend. She graduated at the time, and she told me about the current job I work at right now, and she told me it suits you perfectly, you should go. So I just applied, and thankfully I got it. But that's how I got my first job in Korea. Right now I work at a daycare. All I do pretty much is watch over children. That's it. We can do fun activities sometimes. Sometimes I play with them and just talk to them. Their parents really prefer that I speak to them in English because a lot of Korean kids these days are really interested actually in learning English, but a lot of parents too have a hard time because they need to go to work, they need to fulfill a lot of personal duties, and so they just send their kids to the daycares and say goodbye, and that's where I come in and I just watch them for an hour or so and we just play around. But that's what I currently do. I think it was different because I know that for different locations of my workplace, they do hire Koreans, but some locations prefer foreigners, and so I think there's a different criteria within the foreign umbrella. So if you're a foreigner, they look at what languages you can speak and how well you can speak it. So for example, my first language is French, and when I was younger, my English pronunciation was really bad and I didn't know English as well. So I think they really prefer that you know the languages, you speak really, really well. So I think that's the only criteria they look for. But for different locations, they look at how well you can understand Korean, because in cases of emergencies where the kid is having maybe an allergic reaction or the kid is choking on something, if you don't understand the language, it could be a barrier and there could be complications later. So it just depends on what different bosses and companies are looking for, but I do feel like there are different criteria among foreigners themselves. And I think Koreans prefer foreigners who can speak English well because it sets a good example for the company itself and just attracts more, I guess, more business, because a lot of Koreans want to learn English or they're really interested in the English language. Actually, I was really happy because at the time I really needed a job as soon as possible if I wanted to keep staying in Korea. So when I got the news that, oh, I got hired, all of a sudden my worries started to drift away. But it also made me realize something. If you're a foreigner in Korea looking for a job, you have to market yourself in a specific way for that specific job. So let's say you're going to work at a cafe and your aesthetic or the way you carry yourself or what you stand for is really opposite from what that specific cafe looks for, then there's a lower chance. So it really taught me a lot because I went through a lot of different job applications, different resume making, different interviews, and I was just really ecstatic that I was able to even get a job in the first place. But it also taught me a lot regarding how to market yourself, how to brand yourself as a foreigner or as a professional working in Korea. When I came to Korea the first time, I was so tired. I couldn't think because my dad came with me, but I told him it's fine, he doesn't have to come with me because I had a friend that would come pick me up. But I think going with a parent made my life a bit harder because he had so many questions and he didn't know much about Korea, so I was just really tired and I wanted to eat something. I was like, I want to eat something, so I went to CU. I think it was CU or 7-Eleven in the airport, and I got kimbap, and the first bite I took, I was so happy. I'm like, finally, finally, and I lost my dad in the airport, so I can't remember much. I can't remember. I just was so tired and wanted to go rest. My favorite Korean food used to be kimchi jjigae, but now I feel like it keeps changing all the time because I'm getting a bit homesick. So eating kimchi jjigae all the time made me a bit sick. So I think now I like sundubu jjigae because I don't really like very heavy foods, and I think Koreans like meat, like gogi, but I just like jjigaes or chin like that. I think the hardest thing to adapt in Korea, especially Korean working culture, there's a thing in Korea called nunchi. I don't know how to explain nunchi, but nunchi is kind of like if your friend tells you, oh my goodness, this bracelet is really pretty, I want it for my birthday. You go shopping together and she sees it outside of window and she keeps talking about the same bracelet and you don't buy it for her birthday. That's kind of like nunchi, like reading the atmosphere. And I feel like Koreans culturally are really indirect. They like to go like this and over here and over there. But foreigners are really direct. And I think for Koreans it's a bit rude. It's like, oh, why are you saying it like that? Or why are you being so mean? But no, I'm not being mean. I think foreigners like to communicate effectively. But Koreans like to read the room and be like, I think this is what you're saying, but maybe this is what you're saying. I think for foreigners, adjusting to this type of culture is really hard. Or just like personal space, I think is really hard to adjust because in Korea there's no sense of personal space. Everybody is just kind of together, people bump into you all the time, and I think sometimes foreigners take it personally, but it's nothing personal, it's just how the culture is. But culturally, there are a lot of differences. I think the first one is just communication, and the second one has to be just small, minor things that your day-to-day, how you act. So sometimes when I'm on the phone, I think I have a really low voice, but Koreans might think I'm speaking too loud. Or sometimes there are some Koreans that think I'm speaking too low, but I'm thinking I'm speaking really high. So it's just those little minor incidents and just the way of speech. Like me, my first language is French, and then my second language is English. Sometimes in English when I speak, my intonation goes up and down and up and down. But for Koreans, they might take this really rudely. When I try to speak in Korean, I'm monotoned, and I think for Koreans, when they're trying to be nice, they're like, oh, like this, but I'm just flat. Like, oh, 도움이 필요해요, and they can think I'm being rude. So it's just the communication thing is the most cultural difference, I feel like. Or just being aware of your surroundings and where you're at, reading the room. I think nunchi is really important. Like, I come first, but in Korea, it's very community-based. Like, I help you, you help me. We look for each other, right? Versus, like, we're a whole family in a way, but Westerners just think about themselves. So when you order food, for example, usually foreigners would order for themselves. But I feel like a lot of times in Korea, when you go eating out in a group, you share, but it's just something that's so common, but like foreigners don't pick up on it because they're like, oh, I'm just buying this for myself. But like usually you would buy stuff, like different things, and share it with your friends. So I think foreigners have a harder time adjusting to this mindset because they're very individualistic. So there you go. I got it. So So, and Koreans, on the other hand, Koreans can't understand this because even my Korean friend, for a long time, we wouldn't understand each other because she would ask me, why do you do things like this? Or why do you think like this? She would tell me, like, you should think for the both of us. You should think for all of us, not just yourself. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. So I think it takes time adjusting to this concept, but once you got it down, it becomes easier to understand what they mean. A lot of people have told me I'm a very strong person. I just say stuff very honestly, and maybe people don't like honesty. They like being babied while you tell them things, but I like being very honest. And I think my Korean coworkers, the first time, my first job at my school, it was really hard for me because we had 3 different bosses and we had somebody above those 3 bosses, right? So these formalities, you have to refer to them as like 사장님, 팀장님, and you have to say, oh, 좋은 아침이에요, and like be very respectful. But a lot of the times I wouldn't do this. I'll just be like, oh, good morning, or yes or no. When they ask me questions, I just tell them yes or no. But they want more elaborate answers. They want me to explain further. So it was really hard adjusting to this. If you work in an office in Korea, you have such a great idea, something that you know will work, and your boss just can't see it because they're worried about how people will receive that idea, and they want you to do what they think, not what you think, just what they think. So for me, it was really, really hard, and I kind of disliked working there a little bit. And then my job now, it was harder because it was just different foreigners. I wasn't working only with Koreans, I was working with other foreigners, and the foreign world is really fast, right? There's so many people with different cultures and values, and I think I got off the wrong foot because we have people from Russia, we have people from Turkey, we have people from Uganda, and I feel like Russians are also people who are really honest or with this mindset, just yes or no. So way worse than me, right? And sometimes I would be offended in a way. So it's just a lot of communication problems, I feel like. But it's just, you have to get adjusted to it. And I always like to think you can't be attached too much to your work. You can't take things too personally. So I'm still struggling a little bit, but over time I get better. I feel like my daily routine changes by the month, but these days I've made it a goal for me to really learn Korean because my Korean skills are really bad right now. When people speak to me, I have a general idea of what they tell me, but speaking back is really hard because, especially if you're multilingual, you have to think, you process in different languages. So for example, first I translate what I want to say from English to French, then French to Korean. And so my daily routine now is I go to like a tutoring school, like a Korean language hakwan in the mornings most of the time, and then I go to work, and then I like to focus on fitness, like working out. I think being in Korea is really good because you're always walking around everywhere for your health. But if you're a person that's stuck inside in an office a lot of the times, or you're stuck inside your school a lot of the times, it's just nice to get up and start running or walking. So that's what my routine looks like now, just studying, working, and working out. So in the past, I feel like I was really naive. I just would believe anything and I wouldn't read the room, I wouldn't read the atmosphere before I came to Korea. I mean, I was pretty young before I came to Korea, so that makes sense. But for the most part, when you live with your family, especially if you have a family like mine, who are very overprotective and they like to do stuff for you, it doesn't give you a chance to actually do stuff for yourself. So you just never learn how to be an adult. And when I came to Korea, it was my first reality check in life that I'm an actual adult and I have actual responsibilities that I need to take care of. And a lot of the times I would just be disappointed in myself that I, for example, didn't meet deadlines, or I wasn't punctual enough, or I just wasn't good enough. So I think that's the only difference, because a lot of foreigners coming to Korea start off like young. A lot of foreigners are students, I believe, and they just keep growing in this country, and you just get better at adulting, I feel like, or better at managing different situations. So my current self now, I feel like I'm more responsible and I have a better sense of punctuality, just because Korean time is really like party culture, like very fast. So you have to be aware of these things. So I think looking back, I wouldn't be able to do all of this that I'm doing now as a responsible person. I think when I was in the States, I had a really bad mindset. It was really depressive, like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're not good enough, right? Like this, because there's so many people competing with each other. In Korea, it's the same thing, but because there's so much community here, if you do decide to have a community here and you build upon that, so many people encourage you. They tell you, oh, yes, you can do it, or have you tried doing it like this? And being around these type of people really changed my mindset, and I feel like being in Korea now I'm just more confident in myself, because when you think about it, if you already live here, there's nothing you can't do, because you've had to adjust to a new language, you've had to adjust to a new culture, a new way of being a different person, right? The same person in a different country, I mean. And so when people would tell me this, like I had an ajumma tell me, oh, you're a foreigner in Korea, there's nothing you can't do. Like, you can just do anything. And I told her, yeah, you're right. I can do anything. So now I just have more confidence, I think, compared to before. My only goal right now is to be able to graduate school and to get topic 6 so that I can apply for jobs that fits my major well. I feel like it's a new experience I've been really working hard for, and I want to be able to apply what I learned in school in the real world and help agencies and just our governing societies much better that way. But in the near future, that's what I hope to be doing. Aside from that, I'm leaning towards more creative areas. I think being in Korea really unleashed a creative side in me that I locked up a long time ago. And so these days I'm doing more artsy stuff like modeling or learning how to make a commercial, like things like this. So I hope in the near future I build those skills a bit more, because when you think about it, a lot of our world is becoming automatized, like with AI and just the usage of technology everywhere. So that's something I hope to be able to learn soon. If you want to work in Korea, I'd say you need at least 6 months minimum to a year to do your research, because a lot of the times, I like to call it the job catfishing. A lot of jobs would catfish their job, what you will do at a job, but you don't actually know until you come here, right? And so what happens to a lot of foreigners is that the company that they applied for might not take them really seriously, or they might not operate as a functioning company. They might not regard your worries. So if you're a person who wants to work in Korea, do your research, please. Do a lot of it about the company, about people who've worked at the company before, about your law or the laws as your foreign worker here. I think a lot of people ignore the law in Korea, which is unfortunate, because if you're a legal worker here, you have to know your rights, because if a situation does happen and you don't know what you're entitled to, what you can do legally, it can be really, really difficult. So I'd say give it 6 months to a year to do extensive research, and then make a decision and start the application process. And make sure you have a copy of everything. So whatever you're doing, if you have a copy, make 2 other copies for that and keep it on you just in case. So if you're a job seeker in Korea looking for just anything you can do, I'd recommend you really talk to the people you already know, like the foreigners you already know that are working, because most of the time opportunities can come up at their job and they can put a word of mouth in for you and tell their boss that, oh, I have a friend. That's how a lot of foreigners get their job, actually, through friend recommendations. The second one is you have to really look online, and I mean like Instagram channels or apps. There are a lot of new apps coming out, so you can check out K Campus, Buddies Korea, K-Tag, because they post job opportunities literally every day. And so I literally check my phone every day. I check my Instagram every day in case there's like a new job opportunity or internship opportunities. And they're just really good at helping different foreigners. Like if you have a question, you can give them a little chat. So that's my advice to foreigners already in Korea looking for a job. Or a lot of the times what I like to do, because I have such a big bubble head, if there's a company that I want to work for, I already know their job position that they have. I talk to the company directly. So I wanted to work at a cafe called Sunny Bread House, and I went to the CEO directly, asking her if she needed somebody, and she opened a job application literally a couple weeks after that, but I wasn't able to apply because of other responsibilities. So if you know about certain job postings, go to the person themselves and give them your resume. Tell them, this is who I am, this is what I can do. Do you have any job offers? Because it might be hard if you send your applications and then you wait, you don't hear anything back. This is what happens a lot of the times, where you send your applications in and they don't contact you again. So you have to be the bigger person and contact them, email them, go to them to talk to them about that. And if you're outside of Korea and you're looking to come into work, I would say do a lot of your research. A lot of the times what happens is companies like to catfish, so what that means is they don't tell the whole truth about their job posting. So you might have to do more extensive research. I recommend using things like Naver or Naver Maps, because on Naver Map you can search different companies and you can go to the blogs and you can see different blogs about people talking about the institution. So that's really helpful. Just do your research and make sure that they're not lying to you and they're honest about the job posting. My only tip to give job seekers in Korea is don't give up, because if you keep applying to jobs, you can get really discouraged. You have to really learn how to brand yourself. So a lot of the times when people hear me speak in English, they automatically think I'm American, and that's the only language I speak is French. So you have to market yourself like that, like, oh, I'm a Californian raised English speaker, and then suddenly their ears perk up like dogs. They're like, really? So you have to know your branding. You have to know how aesthetically you come off to brand yourself. That's my biggest number one tip, because people reading your application can just throw it in the trash. So I like to think carefully about what I put on my resume, and I think for Korean resumes, you have to put a picture on there too. So having a professional picture that could make you like look a bit more professional, because a lot of the times foreigners don't think much about it, but everything on the resume matters. So that'd be my tip. Just don't give up and think about how you brand yourself to these companies and what you put on your resume, as well as how you present yourself to them. And I think that makes a really big difference in my experience.
If you're working in Korea, we love to hear from you.